Welcome. My name is Catherine Nolan. You can call me Cath. And we are about to start what I think is the best part of doing a law degree. But I guess you just got to stick with me because it's a compulsory subject and you can tell me whether I'm right or not in 12 weeks. Before we start, sorry, I don't have a clicker that works. I'm hoping, no, of course. I'm going to get my 12,000 steps today. I would just like us to take a moment and acknowledge that we are standing on the country of the people who went before us. So where we are now, that they are the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I would like to acknowledge and pay respects to their elders, past and present, and to any First Nations people who are in the room. I do that because it's the right thing to do, but also because I think we should start any serious endeavour in a serious way. And whilst we will have a lot of fun along the way, I hope, well, I'll have a lot of fun going to do the test, I think that it is really important for us to remember this is a serious endeavour. And this is also the last time that you know nothing about contract law. In fact, some of you might know a great deal about contract law already, I'm sure that you do. But one of the things that you will find is that your thinking changes very quickly. It can be really scary because I don't think anybody really wants to think like a lawyer on purpose. But this is called Fundamentals of Contract Law for a reason. It is a fundamental subject. And whilst contracts underpin all commercial endeavours and are an important part of the study of commercial law, the way that lawyers think and the way that contract lawyers approach contracts is a fundamental mind shift that's really important, not only for this subject, for other subjects going forward. So what do I want to do today? I'm going to spend the first little bit doing some administrative stuff. In particular, I'm going to talk to you about what the assessment tasks are, because I suspect that you can listen to me better once you've got that in your head. For those of you who are online students and are hearing this recording later, and well actually so everybody knows this, we're now running on 2 different learning management systems. So every now and then I'm going to talk about stuff that's in Blackboard. Most of the time that will mean that I'm talking about things that face-to-face students can find in the Blackboard environment because I never got my head around calling it my RMIT. Some of those times it will be because I just am used to saying Blackboard, and what I mean is the online classroom in some way. Canvas is the name of the new Schmidt groovy awesome system, which unfortunately most of us only got access to pretty much a day or 2 before the students who are accessing it that way got it as well. That's something I can't change. It's a bit of a shame. It makes it great for you face-to-face students who will be seeing that system next year because we'll have some room to move. Sorry, there's some Slack conversation going on my computer which I need to stop so it stops making that funny noise. Apologies if I'm dealing with that. I will need to talk about both sets of assignments. We do have some OUA students in the room, which is great. And those are OUA students who are in Melbourne. If you can get to class, I think you should, because if you can, because you get the opportunity to engage with these gorgeous people. You can't see them on the recording, but they are damn fine looking people. And also you get to talk about the ideas, you get to ask the question in the moment as opposed to just listening to the recording, etc. If you can't, at the end of the day, you're still getting the same good stuff. It's just that little bit harder work, I think. So respect to those of you who are in the online environment. Great thing about working in an online cohort as well is those of you who can't come to class every time. Last semester I only had 1 student who came to class every time. I assume it's because you can't come as opposed to you don't want to, but maybe it's because you don't want to. You'll have the benefit of the recordings. And so the work that we do and the stuff that I do that might annoy you, like spending 5 minutes getting it set up at the beginning or repeating your questions while I'm thinking of the answer, but also so that they can be heard on the recording, you will appreciate that stuff later on. Why am I mentioning it now? Assessment overview. The assessment tasks are slightly different for OUA and for face-to-face. In this recording, I'm only going to talk about face-to-face. I will do something separate from OUA other than to point out tiny little bits. Okay, we're going to talk about what the resources are, what prep for revision you need to do, those kinds of things. And then really, this is the intro. We're going to talk about what this course is about. We're going to try and provide some context, do a really high-level overview before we start to do the deep dive. So the analogy that I often use, and for those of you who sat in with me before, you will be bored with this, is I think of contract law as a big jigsaw puzzle. And what we need to do is look at the picture on the box to start off with, because we are going to do this deep dive examination of each of the pieces, and it will be really easy while we're looking at each of those pieces in such detail to get that they fit together to make the big picture. So I want to start with the big picture, think about the context, and then we pull this together. So, first things first. That's me. That's a little dated photo. I think I need a new one. Got different glasses and my hair is whiter now than it was then. If you haven't got the slides yet, you'll get them. So you don't need to take copious notes. All of this stuff will be available. It's also available in the learning management system. I'm trying to use the right language. That is my phone number. I pick it up. I would much prefer that you rang me. I left a message. I won't pick up if it doesn't suit me. If I'm talking to another student or I've got a client, I won't pick it up, but I will call you back pretty quickly. So I'd much prefer you called me than mucked around getting yourselves into a panic, because, you know, there's not that much to panic about. KPI I set myself for emails is 48 hours. I rarely take that long. If I do take that long, it's one of two things. Either there's a very good reason, something is going on that means I just can't get to my emails. More likely, I have read your email on the train, thought, no, these 52-year-old fingers that can't do that typing on my phone are not going to be able to give you a reasonable answer on the train, and then forgotten to mark unread and just forgotten about it. So if it's urgent, you want an answer, I know myself well enough to say, just pick up the phone, send me a text message, or follow up with another email. But usually I get through them pretty quickly. I am happy to talk to you face to face too. As it turns out, I have a class at 8:30 on Monday mornings, and then I have this one. So I am on campus all day Monday is pretty much how it's going to fall out. So if you want to actually have a face-to-face meeting with me, we can make a time on Mondays. That will be great. I'm also happy to stay back a little bit after class, but it will be a long day, and so chances are I will be sleepy. Otherwise, as I said, phone, I do video consults. What I will do is, once I've got feedback from the OUA group, I will run a drop-in shoot every week. So that I'll send you a video link. You can drop in by phone, or you can, on your computer, you can see me, see each other. That shoot is very much driven by questions that people have. It's completely driven by you, and I record them as well, so that's another opportunity. If you ask me a question one-on-one and I think that it might be relevant to other people, I will share it. I won't necessarily share your name, and I might rewrite it to make it not include the bit about your dog or whatever piece of personal information you've given me. But I will run on the discussion boards in both platforms a frequently asked questions area. I tend to run one for each assignment as well. So there are specific questions about the assignments. I don't think there's any such thing as a dumb question, but there can be a really long-winded, lacking in focus question. And sometimes the act of actually writing down your question sends you in the direction of the answer that you want. So yeah, please ask your questions, but think about the best ways to pull them together. On social, non-legal, and I tweet, I've got a hashtag somewhere. When I tweet with a hashtag for anything to do with contract law, I tweet RMIT contract law. It's like fairly obvious. General things that I think might be interesting to law students, I use the hashtag RMITJD. I also teach in fact, some of you have been, or at least one of you has been in my information technology and the law class previously. So, and I'm now teaching in the MBA in a technology class as well. So RMIT Tech Law or RMIT Tech and Innovation, or Tech Innovation are the other two, if you're interested in that stuff. Last semester I experimented with, and I think it worked quite well, having a Facebook group for the class, for both OUA and face-to-face. I tend to find a lot of newspaper articles, or there's no paper, things that I think might be interesting to you. Sometimes I include photos of my dogs. That has happened. I encourage photos of other people's dogs. Yeah, often if I'm sending you stuff through the official channel, it's just too much and you feel like you have to read it. But when I see things that might be of interest, I put them there. So I will send out a link to that. Not compulsory, if you want to join in, join in. Often I find people have the best questions there because it's something that they have access to. But again, if it's a good question that I think everybody should have, I would always put it through the official channels. So, this is my philosophy of teaching in one slide. I know I had an online introduction from a class member just earlier today. So that in the OUA class, who is an academic who teaches in the area of teaching teachers and who has an interest in neuroscience. So this is the bit where I get embarrassed because no doubt they know a great deal more about this than I do, but I'm fascinated by this research that goes back for a long time now, to 1933. Dewey, you will remember him from such hits as the decimal system. He was really interested in the way that people learn and what actually helps you retain information. So I'm using his research here with the ability to retain information as a proxy for learning. Come in. And basically what his research showed, and it holds true today, is the more active you are when you're doing something, the more likely you are to retain the information and be able to synthesize it and do something with it. So in a nutshell, if I tell you 100 things tonight, you will probably retain 5 of them. And I will probably retain 95 of them. And they actually pay me to do this. I just think it's amazing. Best job in the world. So the more active and engaged you are with the materials, the more likely you are to be able to do something with it. So, taking notes, handwriting your notes in particular is a really important way of synthesizing and keeping that information. Turning your notes into something else, doing something with them the next day. Forming a study group. My particular favourite is explaining to somebody who is not a law student something that you learnt, or what a case is, or how a case works. Doing those things will help you make sense of that. So a lot of what I do in my teaching is designed to give you these opportunities, particularly again because we're teaching kind of 2 classes at once, a completely online cohort and a completely face-to-face cohort. I think let's take advantage of that. So there'll be a number of weeks where I will actually give you a lecture in advance. I've recorded them in my study and I will work through the lecture component so that 75% of what we do in the room on the actual evening will be stuff to do with consolidating your knowledge and helping you use those things. This is why online have a slightly different assessment, because we need to make sure that they're doing stuff that engages them actively as well. So they have some more discussion board tasks. Questions, concerns, observations? A lot of you have come straight from work, I get that. A lot of you are tired. I'm really lucky to get Mondays because you're not as tired as you will be by Thursdays. A lot of you just want me to tell you the shit so you can write it down and put it on the test and go home. I get that. This is the bastion bargain that we have, is I actually don't care about the marks that you get. I care about whether or not lawyers that I'm involved in training are actually good in the profession or not. You know, I've been in the profession for a long time, and you know, I feel like you're associated with my personal brand. So I don't care whether it's on the test or not. I care about whether the way you think will make you a good lawyer. But I get that you want to get the best marks that you can. So how we manage that is I try and be as clear as I can about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And if all you want to do is do the reading that you need to do the test, and my guess is there's ways to do that. But if you want to be a good lawyer, well, there's a whole lot of things that you need to do, and I will do my best to facilitate some of them. I don't think I actually told you anything about myself yet. We'll get there. I usually do that on the last slide. So, expectations. Start and finish on time. 2 for 2 today. I've been locked out of the room and I haven't had the time I needed to set up. But we will start and finish on time where we can. In a choice between being late and missing out altogether, be late. I don't care what time you walk through the door, just try and do it with a minimum amount of fuss and don't expect me to recap as we go. It is better to come even if it's an hour and a half into the program later, than not come at all if you can. Don't not come just because you're embarrassed, but expect me to kick off on time and expect me to finish on time, even if that means winding up questions. You're really quiet and nice now. I'm assuming that I'll do less talking and you'll do more as we go. Historically, that annoys some students. Again, some of you just want me to tell you the stuff and so you can write it down and go home. Some of you will really enjoy the activity and the banter and the conversation. I like this class to weigh towards the second of those, but I get it that sometimes it can be too much. If you think it's going off track, if you think we're heading in a direction, give me a sign and I will explain to you why I don't think that is. Because if I think it's going on track, I shut it down pretty quickly. Okay? Having said that, everybody participates in their own way. Some people will want to talk more than I do. Some people, the worst thing that they can think of happening is for them to be called on in class. We need to be respectful of the different ways that different people participate. What I'm asking from you is you bring your best self. You be as awake as you can be, have a reasonable lunch, not too much sugar in the afternoon so we don't have a crash and burn, hydrate, come in ready, willing and able to learn something, because we only get 12 of these and they will go really, really fast. Face-to-face students, speak up, bear with me if I repeat the questions. I mentioned that a bit earlier. OUA, don't forget about the discussion boards in particular as a way for raising your questions and communicating, and feel welcome here. From today onwards, you will do the reading. Sometimes you won't understand it. Sometimes it won't make sense to you. That's the point, is we're not going to spend the 3 hours we have together doing the reading, recapping through the cases. We're going to talk about the readings. Many of you will find that reading beforehand, it's all a bit of a blur. Then we have the class and you go back and read. Some people will find it's just too hard to read the cases. They don't make sense before you've actually put them in the context. What I would suggest with everybody is to read the course notes first, get an overview of where it is that we're going. Then read the relevant chapters in the textbook. As you're going and you're reading the chapters in the textbook, it'll talk about cases that are extracted in the casebook. So when you read the case, a good way to do it is just to have the casebook next to you. When it starts to talk about a case in the textbook, stop there, read the bits of the case, come back again. Okay, really just try and get your head around it, because the overview notes will give you a sense of where we're going. Then we talk about that in class, and pretty much the people who do the best will go back after a class and consolidate and go back and look at that reading or their notes and update from there. So if you're asked to do that preparation, do it beforehand. That's particularly important. It's always important, but it's particularly important when, in addition to those materials, I'm telling you, okay, I prepared a desk lecture for you to watch. Now, when I do the desk lectures, I break them up into sort of fairly small chunks. Having said that, I think some of them are probably 35 minutes long, but many of them are substantially shorter than that, so you can manage your time as you have a listen to or a look at those. But I won't apologise for it. To do well in this subject, you will need to spend a relatively substantial amount of time doing the reading and thinking about the application of it. Like I said before, I'll respond to your questions and answers within 48 hours. Phones. I really don't want to see them unless we're using them in class, but we probably will use them in class. So, as we go. So it would be, when I say phones, anything that connects to the internet. Computers. I've got to say I don't really like them. I don't like seeing them in class, and I would really prefer that you found ways to take notes using your hands. The reasons for that are, there's a science says that you will retain more information, but why I don't like them, and again, it's up to you because people are shutting their computers. Your life, your work, your investment in yourself. You work out the best way to do it. But the one thing that I ask you, if you do take notes on your computer, is that that's all you're doing. If you're looking at Facebook, shopping on eBay, buying a new car, I don't know, out in the dark web somewhere, watching porn, whatever it is that you do, gambling, that's fine for you, that's, I don't care. But the thing is, there's something about the screens that attracts everybody else's eyes. So if you've got people sitting behind you, they can see what's on your screen, and it can be completely innocuous. You can listen and post on Instagram at the same time, I'm sure, but at the end of the day, it's attracting other people's eyes. And I know, actually I don't think there's anybody here from this class. There was one class I taught 18 months ago or so. We were all sitting in this big room, and this woman had Facebook on all the time, and I found I was talking, and then next thing you know, I'm distracted by it. So if you can keep that, if you're going to do that, hit the back of the room where nobody else gets disturbed. But genuinely, I can give you the literature on why it makes sense to use your hand and handwrite. So it says she who never has a pen and handwriting, but I do. I use my tablet all the time. What else? Some of you have been in classes with me before, some of you haven't. Many of you have studied for a really long time. What works? What do we need in a class like this?
We get a better one.
Sorry?
Is there any chance of changing classroom?
Get a room? Oh, I've got no idea. I can ask. It's a terrible room, I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's something that's completely outside of my control. Because of all the building work, I know that the university is at very maximum capacity, apparently. Although given the time of our class, I find it really hard to believe that there wouldn't be something else. I will ask, but it's not on my pay grade.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'll certainly ask. Facilities that I'm assuming that you're keen on is access to a PowerPoint and perhaps a table that you can sit at.
Or desk, yeah.
One of the things I'm finding with a lot of the rooms is they're also very noisy. They've got that low hum, which you really notice on the audio recordings. There's sort of that sort of low traffic noise going on. But from a organising ourselves point of view, again, if anybody thinks of anything, or if you've observed things that work well in other classes, please let me know, let us know, and let's organise ourselves in the best way that we can. And the hashtag, I think, is there, RMIT contract law. My target structure for the classes, I actually added 5 minutes, or took off 5 minutes at the beginning of the class yesterday because I realised how far away this room was, and I believe that this room is in use beforehand, though the locked door would suggest that it isn't. So this is my thought, basically taking a 15-minute break, 15 to 20-minute break, depending on how our timing falls, roughly in the middle, and trying to finish 5 minutes before the half past so people can race out and people want to talk to me that they can. I'm also really open to, and I've done it before, basically breaking for somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes at the 50-55 minute mark. So, 55 minutes after we start, come back 10 minutes after that, and then 55 minutes after that, another 5 minutes for you to stretch your legs. It's really up to you what you want to do. We'll probably stick with this model today, and you guys will let me know what you think. And the reason for doing it this way today is I've got a little bit of intro stuff to talk about, and then we'll get some substance. Gee, it's been a long time since I pissed somebody off that quickly. I thought that was funny. Now you're going to think I'm mean. Okay, this is really hard to see. I should put a black background on it. Next piece of advice to use to plan out your semester. This document here is a PowerPoint. I've just created a PowerPoint calendar, which has got key dates for everything for this subject in it. Last time I shared it as a Word document first as a PDF, and students said to me, oh, actually this is useful for us, we can put our other dates in it and print it out as well. So I've just given it to you as a PDF, so you can get those dates in. And it's got both the OUA and the face-to-face dates in. One of the beautiful things in Canvas, which you can look forward to, is you get a calendar with everything populated in it. It'll make your lives a lot easier. And so the topics, whilst we have 11 topics and then a revision week, the topics, not all topics are the same size and weight. So particularly at the beginning when we're doing a lot of the foundational ideas and concepts, we spend a lot of time. So I will spend 2 weeks on topic 2, and we'll spend at least a full week on topic 3, but it'll probably go into, previously I'd timetabled 2 weeks for it. It's just the combination of when your assessment is and feed forward and things like that. Shall we bundle them up? You need to trust me a little bit on that. Partly because once you actually do your deep dive and you see the jigsaw piece puzzles, you'll see that there is quite a lot of overlap. So when we talk about offer, for example, when we talk about an agreement, which includes offer and acceptance next week, there's actually a lot of overlap between the things we talk about with offer and a subsequent topic, which is about certainty. And you necessarily have to learn about those things in order for them to fit together. So what I've done with each week, and because for weeks and our classes are on Monday, I've got what the topics are. At the end of each week, I've put a list of things I think you should do to revise and make sure you're on top of things. I may well update that this week as well, because we have discussion board topics that are available for each week with when I think you should probably think about doing problems. And then in red, because everybody loves scary red writing, I know it's impossible to read there, you will be able to see the assessment dates. So, and each of the assessment tasks kind of has 2 key dates. One is the date that you get the problem, because they're not available right now, and then the date that it's actually due. And just so that you know, usually in this class, and particularly for the recording's sake, when I talk about a due date, I'll usually talk in class about the face-to-face due date. OUA due dates are 2 days later. Why is that? Could be because I like them better, but it's mainly because it takes 2 days before they get the recording, so it just makes it an even playing field, really. So, let's get to know each other a little bit. Thought I should probably tell you who I am, why I'm here. I really need to think about this and have some sort of patter down. So, I am not really an academic. Technically I'm an academic because I couldn't work in this job if I wasn't. Unlike many of your lecturers, I don't have and I am not doing a PhD. The university has granted me something that is called TESQA 10 equivalency. So essentially what they've done is they look at my reputation in the industry, my publications, things I've been involved in doing, and they've said, yeah, it's not as good as a PhD, we're going to give you tenure, but actually we recognise your industry credentials, and this is a university where we're ready for life and work, so we're going to ask you to teach in the area of your expertise. And so what's the area of my expertise? I was admitted to practice in 1989. 1988, there was a pretty major stock market crash actually, and so, you know, before that being, you know, it was all Wall Street, and everybody's seen that movie with Gordon Gekko and the big phones and everything, and then suddenly it all crashed. But in, you know, 87, 80, early 88, we, you know, a law degree from Sydney University meant you were going to get a good job. So I went straight into a very large law firm and then spent a whole lot of time involved in the liquidation of a whole lot of companies that went under when the market crashed. But very quickly I ended up working as a major projects lawyer. So I was involved in big infrastructure projects. And I spent probably the first 10, I think of my time as a lawyer, it's not quite 30 years, but it's getting close, in these kind of 10-year packets. So the first 10 years I was basically a big projects lawyer. So I spent a lot of time in Asia, particularly in China, sometime in Northern Africa, also in South America, and bits of what was by then the former Eastern Europe, being involved in projects involving the building of big power stations. So commissioning, so I worked in part for an American law firm, and over time, so those big projects, they're massive, right? People do very specific things, and so I was often involved in the equity financing elements of it. So I became an equities lawyer. By the time I had my first kid, I was less keen on travelling to really remote places that didn't actually involve me taking, where they wouldn't give me insurance to take my child with me. So I sort of came a bit closer to home, and I've always been a bit of a geek, and I really got interested in technology, particularly the technology stuff at the time that was coming out of China, leading up to the Hong Kong handover. So I basically became an equities lawyer. Initially, I was involved in, prior to 1997, I can't believe that's 20 years ago, but in that sort of, it was in that basket of time, a whole lot of those infrastructure projects that I was involved in were owned by people who lived in Hong Kong, who at the time were very scared about what might happen when China took Hong Kong back again. As it turned out, they probably would have saved a lot of money and been a lot happier if they just left their money where it was, because it all worked out very well for them. But at the time, they were looking at other ways to make sure that they could protect their assets. So in Australia, in Canada, in the UK, and to a lesser extent on the NASDAQ in the States, these companies that own Chinese assets indirectly were being listed. And so I got involved in that, and I got more of an interest in technology. So I became essentially an equities lawyer. I did a lot of work in IPOs, so initial public offerings, a lot of buying and selling things. And so the very first subject that I started teaching here was acquisitions, takeovers and mergers, which I'm teaching over summer. And so that was sort of the bread and butter for the next 10 or so years of my career. Like I said, really interested in technology, was really interested in the way that the ASX was moving from, you know, chalkies on the board through to becoming a fully software technology system. Interested in a whole lot of those areas, and so with my equity skills, I started working with fundraising for smaller entrepreneurial companies that were raising capital in different ways, not just on the stock exchange, to release their technology offerings. And so, long story short, I, as a shareholder and a founder, have been involved in 2 companies that have listed on the stock exchange in the last few years, or in the last 7 years. One of them last year, before you Google me, it was a spectacular failure. So the most recent one that I did, a company called Domicom. Failure, I mean, in terms of share price, we've actually got a good business. We managed to raise the money that we need, but unfortunately, myself and all the poor punters who invested in us have got a lot less money than they thought they would at this stage of the game. But, you know, anyway, in company law, you'll realise why that doesn't matter so much. So, basically all through that, what's the common thing? I'm basically involved in contracts of different sorts. The industry's changed from big infrastructure, electricity projects, through to a range of different projects across the whole of China, through specifically to financial services technology, which is sort of where I ended up, and all of that. But what am I doing? We're buying things, we're selling things, we're entering into contracts all of the time. So I guess one of the things, I never know whether I should really say this or not, but one of the reasons that I started to do this is because a lot of the time that I spent as a lawyer working with young lawyers just seemed to me that people were coming out of uni and they just really sucked. Like these really bright people with really awesome marks, they just didn't know how to be lawyers. They knew how to answer exam questions, they knew how to write essays, but they weren't thinking like lawyers, they weren't acting like lawyers, they weren't drawing the dots to become the trusted advisors that lawyers are. And so it seemed to me when I had the opportunity to do this job that that's the thing that I can give back to a profession that's been really good to me. So that's what I care about. I care about you guys not sucking. I get it that you want to be good at answering exam questions, and I think you probably need to be able to do that, but that's kind of the very least of it. So that's me. That's why I'm here. You guys know each other a little bit. Who's in their first semester? Can you just show me? Okay, so a lot of you. Who's second semester? Okay, so some of you, that's why your faces are familiar, because I was in. So you guys have just come out of intro this weekend. In fact, I wanted to come to the pub with you, but I only just got back from Vietnam and my father-in-law's ill and it all pear-shaped. So hopefully you had a nice time at the pub and you drank something for me, because it's very hard to get a drink of anything out of GSBL, so I think each of you should have had something for me. And then a few of you have been around for a bit longer, so you've been here for more than a year. I know you have Michael, so some people are doing it slowly. You've been around for a little bit too. Sorry, what's your name?
My name's Dee.
Sorry?
Dee.
Z.
D.
D.
Yeah.
D. We've been emailing. D.
Yeah.
Of course. So a couple of you got to know each other a little bit beforehand. How many of you have ever worked in a law firm? One. Good. Good to know. Two. Okay. Good to know. We need to know who these people are. How many of you can imagine yourself actually being a lawyer at the end of this? Oh, a little reluctance there. How many of you are doing it because it augments or impacts some other aspect of your working life? Quite a few of you, and rightfully it should overlap. How many of you are doing it because your mum thinks you're smart? I did a law degree because a nun at my school told me to, and there's no doubt about it in my life that if nuns tell you to do stuff, you're better off not arguing. It worked out well for me. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it just turned out fine. We're going to run out of time if I go through here and ask all of your names and ask why you're here. I would really love it if you were able to introduce yourselves on the discussion board. Tell me who you are and what you're doing, like as in why you're here, what you're thinking about with contract law. It'll give me some sense of who you are and the rest of you a sense as well. For the foreseeable future, I will probably ask your name every time I speak to you. If you tell me different names, it'll probably, I was about to say a rude word, but you know, see how we go. So, this is the question that I asked on the discussion board, which no face-to-face people have answered. So occasionally what I will do is use this tech to ask you probably multiple choice questions. A couple of reasons. One is it gives me a sense, if I ask you a question and 100% of the room gets it right, I know to move on. But, sorry? No? I got to tell you, the worst thing that can happen to a teacher is to ask a question and somebody give you the right answer straight away. Because I've got no idea whether you've just flipped ahead on the slides. I can see you've got all those slides printed out, and chances are that I'm going to adjust them every week, and it's, oh, the poor trees.
They're already dated. They're already cut.
They're already cut. Awesome. But why I say that, the worst thing that can happen to me is I ask you a question, you get it right straight away. Firstly, I've got no idea whether you understand. I've got no idea whether everybody else agrees with you and understands where you're at. I'd rather have this kind of conversation. So occasionally I will use this. So let's have a look at what we've got. Topping up your Mikey. Topping up a Mikey. So I wonder, is that a new contract, or is it fulfilling part of your obligation under an existing contract? That's a good question we might explore later on. Buying a coffee. I love that example because that's the contract I enter into every day. And many of us will buy coffee or a soft drink or a juice or whatever quite regularly. And actually unpicking, it'll drive you insane. You will never be able to go into a cafe the same way again. But actually unpicking all of the steps of a contract in buying a coffee, because it's so easy to relate to, make quite a lot of sense. A legal firm's cost agreement. See, this is all anonymous. I don't need to know what you did or why you've needed to get a cost agreement with a client. A law firm. Got a few people who've entered into employment contracts and even an employment variation. So again, that's interesting. Is a variation to a contract of itself? Does it create a new contract? Is it an amendment to an existing contract? What does that mean? Parking in a private car park. Again, excellent example. Lots of the things that we do every day are contracts. Agreement is, you'll hear me say this over and over again, agreement is a verb. It's also a noun. Contract is a verb. It's also a noun. So the agreement is the thing, the verb is the thing that people enter into. Agreement is the relationship or the contractual relationship between the parties. The agreement or the contract that lawyers write is a record of that agreement. Lawyers don't make agreements, well sometimes they do. The cost agreement is a really good example there where the lawyer is a party to it. But on the whole, we as lawyers, we need to recognise where there should be a contract, whether that contract needs to be in writing or not. If it is in writing, how to write it down. So I fit squarely on the side of the lovers as opposed to the fighters. Somebody asked me before I came in, did I teach the advanced contract law? Like, is this just really a 12-month subject where you get 12 months of me? I'm very pleased to announce that nobody needs to get 12 months of Cath. It's fine. But the second subject will be taught by a barrister. So I'm a transactions lawyer. I'm a practitioner. I spend my life writing contracts. This subject is about how we make contracts. It always feels to me a bit intuitively wrong. It's a really bit hard for you guys who haven't been out there in the commercial world to think about it. But we learn about how to write a contract by studying case law, which is like deciding to learn about how to have a happy marriage by finding all the divorced and unhappily married people you can and talking to them. Like, yes, they will add some value as what not to do, but they don't tell you how to have a happy marriage or a happy relationship. So My job as a transaction lawyer is to help you understand what a contract is, how to recognise one out in the wild, what the elements of the contract are, and ideally how to think about creating a contract, writing a contract, being the lover. Then you'll be there with the fighter, you'll work out how contracts end. Now again, that can make you, like when you Google symptoms, you suddenly realise that you're going to die and you've just got a head cold? Studying advanced contract law could do that to you as well, because you will read about all of these people, all these fights that people have about contracts. The reality is that's the very, very tip of the iceberg. For people to have a fight that's so bad that they go to litigation at all, much less for it to end up in the High Court after subsequent appeals, it must be a pretty damn big failure of some sort. And yet hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of contracts every day, they get formed, they get executed in the sense of each party does what they said they would do, or close enough so that nobody really minds, and then the contract it expires because everybody's done what they should have done. So that's what I'm trying to bring to you is, and because you'll do this the whole way through your law degree, because that's what we do. We study the symptoms in order to understand the diseases. Not everything is actually a disease. So thank you for your input there. Shall I talk about assessment now? Put you out of your misery? Okay, in week 4, you are going to be asked to write a memorandum to a supervising partner. So basically you will get a problem. I'm trying to remember where I'm giving you the problem. It will be after next week's class. Why don't I give it to you straight away? Because as soon as I give you a problem, everything I tell you, you'll only be listening for the solution to your problem, okay? I just want at least 1 week. Last time I was able to wrangle so that we did the assignment in week 5, and so it was a good 3 weeks I had before we got there. For the face-to-face class, this will be worth 20% of your overall mark. For the OUA students, it will only be worth 15%. Same assignment, everything else is the same, it's just the value is different. OUAs will also need, so the discussion boards, you'll get the same questions too. I absolutely encourage you to do them. OUAs they have to do at least 5 of them. Well, in fact, they don't have to do them. It's just 5% of their mark comes out of the best 5 responses on the discussion board. If I were you, I would do them too, because they're the closest thing, the discussion board problems are the closest thing that you get really to exam questions, and they give you a chance to basically have a go at answering those questions in the exam format and getting feedback from me and from your colleagues as you go. We had exactly the same setup last semester, and overwhelmingly the OUA students did better on the exam than face-to-face students. I suspect because they felt they had to do this because they were getting 5% of their marks for it, where you guys only did it, well, not you, but you know what I mean. You're all my face-to-face students. So think about doing that piece of work anyway. I have said, I will release the problem on the 26th of July, so I think that's Wednesday next week, my guess. In week 10, you're going to do a week, or by the end of week 10, you need to submit a letter of advice. The letter of advice could cover any of the topics up to topic 10. Essentially, in the first task, you'll get a problem. And I'll tell you now, by the way, because I lack imagination, I do the same thing every time. You guys all work for Dennis Denuto. Does anybody know Dennis? He's got a law firm out in Coorparoo. It smells a little bit smoky at the moment. By the way, I'm not supposed to do it, but I do have a pop culture reading list as well. If you haven't watched The Castle yet, you should. Why do you work for Dennis? Well, Dennis needs somebody to work for him, let's face it. And if you work for Dennis and you're a good lawyer, you want to cross every T and dot every I. Make sure that you have done your research properly, because chances are Dennis will miss stuff. if you don't bring it to his attention. In fact, in the past, occasionally he has had a supervisor from the LIV looking over his shoulder who may well look at your work. That would be me. So Dennis has a whole heap of wild and wacky clients. All sorts of things happen. I know last semester he was working for Elon Musk from memory. I tend to find that he has a pretty in-the-moment kind of question based on current affairs, and we try and find something that really only covers the stuff that you've dealt with, agreements, maybe some consideration by that stage. You write him a memo to advise him what he should do in relation to the client. The next task, he's going to ask you to write a draft letter to the client. And part of what you're going to need to do is write to the client to answer their question, but then support that with a memo to your boss explaining why you came to the answer that you did. Because by that stage, you will need to be able to do two things. You'll need to be able to write, let me step back. You will need to be able to solve a relatively complex legal problem and explain your answer using legal logic, legal language, and supporting it with case law for another lawyer. But then you will also need to translate that into plain English for a layperson, so somebody who is not a lawyer. So those two things together will be the second task that you have. That will be worth 30% of your mark. There will be a pretty clear rubric that will explain to you what you need to do. The problem for that one you will get on the 28th of August. I'm just having a little senior moment. I think I planned that so that you get it in the semester break. Okay, so that you have a little bit of time, but I will run a feed forward. OUAs will need to submit or finalise their discussion board pieces by the end of week 12, and then sometime, I've just said 14 plus. I have no oversight or control over when your exams are, but it'll be around then. You'll have an exam that covers 50% of your marks and could cover anything in the course, and we'll talk about that later. So as I said before, be mindful of the assessment criteria. In the OUA under the new platform, I don't think that's really available to you at the time that I'm speaking, but I will make sure that it is available by the end of the week. It's just I have to work out how to do it, and I don't want to get it wrong and lead you down a garden path, but you don't need it for a couple of weeks. For face-to-face, you'll be able to download a copy of that and read it. Again, impossible to read there. I'm just trying to show you that it looks, there's a sort of matrix that it looks like, and for each of the things that we are assessing, it's basically divided up, and it's got a brief description of what that element looks like at the fail through the high distinctions phase. You guys have probably seen all of those before. I mark in a spreadsheet, it's pretty mathematical, so if I think your writing, which is worth whatever it's worth, 20% or something, is outrageously good, and I give you 90% for that, but I think your legal logic is shocking and I give you 2% for that, the spreadsheet does its magic and it comes up with a number. So I'm not just looking at it and thinking, where does that fit? So I know what you really need at for these assignments is this is part of your learning and part of your feedback, so I try to do as much of that as I can, and we do some feedback and feed forward sessions in the classes as well. Having said all that, don't try and read everything on the slide, I just want you to know that it's there. These are the descriptions of what an HD through to a fail looks like for JD assessment pieces. So while we've got the specific details, we also need to look at it in the bigger picture. And I think it is really worth your while before you get started to actually ground and anchor yourself in the standard of the expectations that we have. And The one thing I've really learnt recently is working with students is the higher your expectations of them are, the higher and better they perform. So I'm just back from a week and a bit in Vietnam with a group of MBA and JD students, and particularly the JD students just blew me out of the water. Like, I thought I had high expectations of them already, but they just absolutely did this amazing job, and I think they had a really good time too. But yeah, it's like, it's not reducing my expectations of you. The other thing that I'd like to talk about here, sorry, I'm going to try and go right out of time, is particularly for those of you who are in your first semester. There's something, and I know it gets boring, I know I've heard from other students, oh, I'm so sick of hearing how this is a master's level degree. Like, what does that even mean? This is the real big difference. What we are really looking for, that we didn't look for in your undergraduate degrees, is an element of synthesis. So you've spent a lot of time doing analysis, and you still need to do it. Pulling things apart and really understanding each of the elements. And that's what we're going to do with contract law over the next couple of weeks. What you need to do in order to do very well in any of your law subjects, but in contract law in particular, is you need to be able to add some synthesis. You need to be able to take those constituent elements and synthesize them into something new. So you need to be able to take what you learn and apply it in a way that demonstrates thoughtfulness, that demonstrates originality of thought, demonstrates understanding of the rules and thinking about the way that they will apply. Study law can be very formulaic. You know, if this, then that. I mean, a lot of us could have been programmers in a way, but it's the contextualizing and the synthesis that separates the good textbooks. This is what they look like. Don't lug them in here, you won't need them. Other than potentially on the very last week 12, when we have a revision class. I only say that because, you know, we're not going to be picking them up in class and they're heavy. They're expensive. I really apologise for that. Like, they are ridiculously expensive. They are used for 2 classes though. If you really can't afford to have both of them, or just don't want to have both of them, you're choosing one, I would choose the textbook over the casebook. All of the materials, I'll be there in a second, all of the materials are in the casebook. You can access through law libraries and otherwise. It's just going to require a great deal of work, and they will be whole cases, not just the extracts. Now, I know, I've heard people say to me, I never read a case the whole time I went to law school. Some of you may choose to do it that way. I really don't think you should. It's harder, but the practice is worth it. Sorry, can you remind me of your name?
SJ.
SJ.
I was just wondering what the how different it was from the 4th edition.
How different is this from the 4th edition? Not overly. What I would suggest, if you've got the earlier edition, which I think is fine, is borrow one from a friend and identify in the preface to the 5th edition, it will tell you what the substantial differences are, and work out whether, I think most of them actually impact advanced. I think there's an additional case that they have in one of the later topics that we have. There's a little bit of change around the intention from memory. But if you have a look at what the differences are, work out whether you want to photocopy or change that. I wouldn't. Look, the reality is we are going back to the olden days, my friends. There is very little current law in relation to contract law, so think about that. You're not dealing with brand new cases every week like you might be in, well, I wish we were in technology. Unfortunately, in technology, people are not litigating or they're settling out of court, so we've got no real idea how things are actually being resolved or how they would be resolved anyway. competition law, and in company law there's a lot of activity because we've got regulators who will bring actions. But on the whole, private law, which is what we were talking about, commercial people, they don't want to air their business in court. They don't want people to know when their deals have gone sour. They don't want to spend the money. And it really requires people to not only to want to have a fight, but be prepared to fight it all the way out until it gets to the High Court for law to be made. So, again, the principles of contract law, the principles only change when there are cases for the judges to decide to make a change. Good thing about it, great for me, because really, half the cases I'm talking to you about are cases that I had to study back when I went to school in the last millennia. So yeah, earlier versions. Some people also use, there's another textbook that I know has been quite popular as a second-hand book, which is Stephen Graw's textbook. I think that's quite good. Sorry, your name? Rowan.
Being assessment focused, but I saw that it's an open book exam.
Yeah.
And this is my first law subjects. Would you want the textbook to take to an exam? That sounds
well, in fact, my next slide probably actually goes to this. Rowan and I planned this earlier.
Oh, yeah.
I really wish you could all use the electronic version. I know it takes a little bit to get your head around using electronic text, but you guys are just starting. And in law firms, they're not spending money on library. Office space in the city, it costs a fortune. Library space is expensive, books are expensive, and actually people don't need books, they need the information that's in the books, particularly in areas that are changing. So electronic text, online databases are the way that we need to go. I think you should be using these. Also, I don't know about you, but Control F is a lot more powerful than my eyes when I'm looking for a keyword or a case or something. I love Control F. I Control F everything. I Control F my children if they let me. Bad news, you can't take it into an exam. So what does that mean? Well, most of you will have a combination of handwritten notes, you'll have slides. I've kind of created a big document of all of the key cases, which many people take and annotate and add their own bits to. There's plenty of resources that you can use. But there is nothing like when you're seeing something thinking, holy Cape Crusader, I really wasn't expecting something about novation. I'm thinking of a question. I had a question on the last exam. I actually ended up tweeting this 3-letter acronym that was the answer to one of my questions from an exam. It was anonymous, so I had to send it. So the answer was WTF to one of the questions. That person passed, by the way. What they could have done was look up the word novation in the index to their textbook and work backwards from there to sort of remember where it was sitting, and they probably would. But, we use the legal language. So yes, textbooks can be useful that way. It's the way that you work. If you do it as an electronic text, you need to be prepared to be able to print out and work your own notes. Frankly, I think that's better. You know your own materials. I'll give you stuff and you think, oh, that's great, that's saving you all of that effort. But if you don't put the effort in, if you're reading something for the first time in the exam, it doesn't matter whether it's printed notes or the textbook, it's not a good position to be in reading something for the first time in an exam. But we will talk about exam technique when we get there, and it's open book exams the whole way through. But they will not let electronic devices into exams. You better guess what I think about it. But yeah, particularly those of you who like to scribble, etc. One of the things that comes with the textbook is we have access to this tool, Thomson Reuters Mentor. There are links to it in the blackboard. There will be links in the Canvas site as well. You have to register with them every semester. Stuff goes wrong, I'm not sure why. It can be a little bit hard to register. But basically, once you go in, you will see, you pick subject, the subject is contract law. I'm using exactly the same code. I continue to use it because sometimes people who are doing advanced contract law like the opportunity to go and use it too. So basically, there's a series of multiple choice quizzes, one for each chapter of the book. The books match the topics. They're very old school legalistic questions. They often turn on the language. I probably, the way that I teach and the way that look, you won't get multiple choice exam questions, but they're really good for unpicking the nuance in the language, and the legal language can be quite difficult to deal with. They're hard. I get an email every time somebody does it that doesn't tell me who you are. I can drill in and have a look, but I actually have quite an interesting life, so I don't do that. But I see quite regularly people getting 20-30%, like they're hard. But you can do them as often as you like, and every time you do them, it actually doesn't give you a lot of information, but it'll tell you where to look in the textbook so that you can unpick it. And they often form good discussion questions for our discussions. I recommend them. I think they're really good to do. My guess is less than 10% of students have actually done them. And so there you are. There's something that gives you an edge straight away. I probably should actually have a look and see if those 10% are the students who are doing well. Maybe I will, but I would suspect that they probably are.
Cath, did you say that you need the textbook to access that?
No.
Anybody
can access that. It's just because we recommend the textbook, they make that available to us. Oh, sorry, I've got a few extra slides here about how to do that. I don't know why they're there. Sorry, that was not my intention to show you all of those. Something's gone wrong in my sorting it out. Okay. Now this is important for face-to-face because I need to get your agreement, or the agreement is 75% of you to something, because I made a mistake. Well, I don't know, but anyway. For your first assignment, the part B, which is your contract with the university. So if you go into your course guide, it says, there's a description of the subject, and the part B part is the bit that says what the topics are and what dates your assessment are. It looks like I got a typo in there. My intention was that it should be due on the 12th of whatever that date was. I'll bring it up in the break so you can have a look at it. And anyway, it says the 10th. For some reason, it should be due on a Sunday night, and for some reason it's due on a Thursday night or a Friday night or something. Unless I have the approval of 75% of you to change it to the later date, to the Sunday night, I'm not allowed to change it. So, no, I would just humiliate the people who want to get it in early if I ask for who doesn't want the change. Could I just have a quick show of hands for anybody who's happy for it to change to 2 or 3 days later? Thank you. Any of you want to get it in early, I won't object. I know I've actually done that without showing you what the actual words are, but I just know it's a typo and I just want to get it sorted out. From the part B, that's where you can see the list of the topics, the order that we do them in. I keep thinking I should move my game here. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer at the beginning, and so I haven't always kept exactly to the plan. I recognise that some people find that a little bit frustrating. I'm very clear as we go what you need to do for next week, and I've never ever not got there by the end. But I just want to say sometimes it takes us a little bit longer to understand something than we expect, and sometimes we fly through stuff really, really quickly. I don't know you yet. I don't know how that's going to be for you. But in a nutshell, this is kind of the approach that we take. We're going to start today, but we're going to have a break in a minute. But we're going to start by actually just doing that high level look at what the little jigsaw puzzle is. And then we're going to break down all of the elements of a contract. From there, once we know what a contract is and we can recognise one in the wild, we're going to look at the reasons why it might not be enforced. And then we're going to go into the section where we look at how do we read one, how do we actually recognise what the terms of a contract are. But in order to understand those later things, we do need to spend quite a bit of time, particularly at the very beginning, in pulling it together. And then so far I've always managed to have a full 3 hours of revision at the very end where we can do some problems and we can get ready for the exam. So, helpful stuff. Prepare for class. Helps me, helps you. I'm going to present on the basis that I've assumed that you've read things. I'm a bit of a storyteller, as you've probably noticed. And for me, the best thing about the cases is the stories behind them. They can be a little bit harder to pull out from the principles. So, yeah, sometimes I will talk about the stories, but sometimes I'll be looking for that from you as well. It is really worth finding the time after class to do your 5 minutes of so what. Like, what's actually important? What did I really get out of this? What do I need to do next? As the quicker that you consolidate your thinking, because this really is a black letter law subject, the quicker you can consolidate what's important and take those notes, the better off that you will be. And again, think about finding somebody who you can tell the stories to, that you can explain these concepts to. My dog's a great listener. Not sure how much she understands, but do that, because going back to my original slide, that's when you will remember, that's when it will make sense, and you will find that a layperson, if you can find a way to tell them this story in an interesting way, they'll have interesting questions and think about it in ways you haven't. And go back, reflect on the experience. Think about the contracts that you enter into every day, and think about whether anything you learn changes the way that you see those contracts, or the choices that you've made. Where that often really shines out for people is when we start talking about consumer contracts. Use the mentor materials, use the discussion board, participate in the Facebook group if you want to. Be alert but not alarmed. See what you recognise in the wild, and keep asking why so you can synthesise. EndNote, especially for those of you who are just starting. EndNote is a program that's available free for all university students. It takes a huge amount of mucking around to set it up for AGLC3. I would never recommend anybody who is near the end bother, but because you're at that early stage, think about, if technology is not your thing, if you don't know what a style is in Word and you've never generated your own table of contents or anything like that, don't bother. But if you are prepared to put in that investment, I think early on in your degree it is absolutely worth doing. Think about the way that you organise your stuff. So I'm a big fan of Evernote. Again, Control F, I can find things, it's free, it keeps things really well, I don't have to back it up, being able to put all of my materials together. I actually use the paid version because I can scan my handwritten notes into it, and its optical character recognition is fantastic. So I can find handwritten notes and remember things that way. OneNote, anybody who's a Microsoft user, it comes for free. That's a really good sort of version of keeping your notes and stuff as well. My daughter's a big fan of the bullet journal, and you know, a beautiful piece of journaling, only going to make you feel proud of what it is that you do. But think about your systems now, particularly those of you who are early on, because those of you who are in second semester, I'm sure, can attest that the 12 weeks goes really quickly and you feel like there's a ton of time, but you're going to be so reliant on your notes and being able to find the things and remember things as you go. So, shall we take a break, stretch our legs now, and then we'll do some actual substantive stuff. I'll stop being your mum.